Number 1.
To give some background information, this event occurred a little over a year ago, and I still haven't been able to even begin to get over it. I'm a 22-year-old 5'4" female, and at the time I was 21. My family and I had recently moved to a new town that was a fair amount more rural than the town that I had previously lived in, and our new house was a large ranch-style house with a basement. I was home from college, and my parents had left for the week to celebrate their wedding anniversary with their friends, who lived several hours away. Before I continue, I'll give a quick layout of the house so that you'll be able to imagine the setting a bit more clearly. There were 3 doors which led into the house, one on the front porch, a sliding glass door on the back porch, which did have a lock and floor-length curtains for privacy, and another door on the other side of the wall from my bedroom which led into the garage and basement. When you walk out of my bedroom and turn, you can see all the way across the house to the door of my parents' bedroom and the stairs leading up from the basement. It had been a few days since my parents left, and I hadn't had any problems. They had sent me a couple messages on Facebook letting me know that they arrived to their friend's house safely and were having a good time. The day had gone well, and I was sure to check that I had locked all the doors of the house once the sun started to go down. It was about 11 PM, and I was doing my nightly routine of laying in bed and messing around on the computer, when I suddenly got this sinking feeling of dread. I felt as if I was being watched. It was summer and we didn't have AC, so I had a large box fan in the window blowing the cool night air into my stiffeningly hot room. But once that feeling settled over me, I decided that I should remove the fan and close the window, just in case. Once removing the fan, shutting and locking the window, and also pulling down the curtain, I felt a bit better. However, I still couldn't shake the feeling of dread. I lay back in bed and tried to continue what I was doing, though I didn't put my headphones back on. After a few minutes, I began to hear something that sounded like scratching. I sat still in bed, listening to the sound, trying to pinpoint what it was and if I recognized it at all. Our new house, although relatively close in distance to our neighbors, had a fair amount of forest around it, so I thought the scratching may have been an animal or someone's dog that got loose and wanted to come inside. After a few minutes, the scratching stopped and everything returned to silence. So I figured that I was probably right and that it must have been an animal. My relief was short-lived, as soon after the scratching stopped, from the other side of the wall I began to hear slow footsteps descending into the basement. This is when I knew I was completely fucked. There was no way I could get out of the house without walking past the basement stairs. We didn't have a house phone, and at the time, I was in the process of getting a new cell phone because mine was broken beyond repair. I sat there for a few seconds wondering what the hell I should do. I knew that I would need to get out of the house as soon as possible, and that the more time I wasted, the worse it would get for me. I contemplated popping the screen out of my bedroom window and jumping out, but it was far enough off the ground that there was a good chance I would end up getting hurt if I did. Not to mention that if I jumped out the window and hurt myself, I wouldn't be able to run for help and I would be right next to the door that whoever was in my house had gone in through. So I decided to very carefully and quietly open my door and peek out around the corner, and if the coast was clear, I would make a mad dash for the front door and sprint to my neighbor's house. I very slowly opened my bedroom door, letting my eyes adjust to the darkness of the house before creeping around the corner and looking to see if it was safe to make a run for it. What I saw nearly made me vomit. As my eyes scanned the house, I noticed that something was off. I squinted hard as I looked over the basement stairs and was able to make out the shape of a man. And what made it worse? He wasn't just standing at the top of the stairs. He was crawling up them like some kind of a nightmare creature. I quickly backed into my room again, shutting and locking the door as quietly as I could. I didn't think he'd seen me, but there was no way that I was going to make a run for it now. My only choice was to pop the screen and jump out the window. As I was unlocking and opening my window, I heard the handle to my bedroom door turn. Once the man realized it was locked, In a sinkingly sweet, sing-song voice, he cooed,
"I know you're in there."
This was followed by a loud cackle, and what I can only imagine was him throwing himself at full force against my door. I ripped the screen out of the window and flung myself out. I landed wrong on my right foot, and I was sure that I'd hurt my ankle, but at the time I couldn't think of anything other than getting as far away as possible. I got up and ran as fast as I could to my neighbour's house, knocking on their door in a panicked frenzy and ringing the bell over and over. I looked over at my house as I was yelling for my neighbours to let me in, and I swear to God, I could see the man standing at my window, waving at me. My neighbours finally opened the door after what felt like forever, and I managed to explain well enough what was going on for them to let me in and call the police. I stayed with them until the police arrived. The police searched my house and found that the lock to the basement had been picked, and that the door to my bedroom was hanging off the hinges. They weren't able to find the man anywhere, and because I had only seen him for a split second in the dark, I couldn't provide them with a good description of him. Of course, I got into contact with my parents immediately, and they hurried home. The police took my statement and searched the area for the man, but of course, they came up with nothing. After this event, my parents and I were sure to add deadbolt locks to the door leading into the basement and to the door leading out of the basement to the rest of the house. They also helped me pay to get a new phone. What really bothers me about all of this is that nothing was stolen. There wasn't even any evidence that the guy had looked through anything while he'd been in my house.
Number 2.
This all happened when I was at the age of 10. I always had trouble sleeping and spent most nights tossing and turning. I was a horror film fanatic as a child, and being scared was something I didn't have much experience with. I was not afraid of the dark, nor was I easily swayed by strange sounds or odd encounters. I did, however, know when to haul ass out of a situation, or to find a trusted adult. I always slept with my closet doors open, which will come to be of some significance later in the story. I should also mention that my family home was in a heavily wooded area, in what some may refer to as the middle of nowhere. One night, at around 1 AM, I woke up to a sound coming from underneath my bed. It sounded like one of my cats was scratching themselves with one of their feet, or doing something to cause a thumping beneath me. I had heard this same sound many times before, and its source had always been one of my fuzzy friends. So, this time, I didn't look. I closed my eyes and tried to resume my slumber. I turned over onto my left, which left me facing the wall against which my bed was pressed up. I heard the sound again, and thinking that my kitty was directly beneath me, I said, "Good night." I was able to fall asleep once again. The next time I awoke, it was to a surreal and shocking scene. The sheet and comforter of my bed were no longer covering me. I saw a man standing over my bed, poking me, fucking poking me with his finger, and the way in which he did so was truly horrifying. It was not the way that a child would poke a friend in jest. It was as if he was touching another human being for the first time, exploring the sensation of the tip of his index finger jabbing at my flesh. What I saw was so unbelievable, so impossibly strange, that I believed I was dreaming. I tried desperately to awake from my nightmare, to no avail. The poking continued. He poked at my chest, my belly, my legs and arms. Paralyzed and scared shitless, I yelled, "Wake up!" And with this, the man threw himself to the floor and closed his eyes, as if he was trying to lead me to believe that he was asleep or dead. I had no idea. It was at this time I realized I could not have been dreaming. I somehow found the ability to move, and I jumped from the top of my bed over the man lying on the floor next to me and ran towards my parents' room. When I got to their bedroom, something came over me. I told myself that this was all impossible. There was no way that a person could have entered our home without breaking in, as we had always kept every door and window locked at night. I had seen many strange things in my home whilst either falling asleep or waking up. By the third or fourth time, after speaking to my mum or dad about it, I knew that it was my mind playing tricks on me.
Don't ask why, as I have no explanation to offer you, but I turned away from my parents' bedroom door and decided to hastily check the house for a break-in. What I found was that nothing was out of the ordinary. No broken windows or locks, no busted doors, nothing. I assured myself that I had to have been dreaming or hallucinating, and blamed my obsession with horror for this. I made my way down the long, dark and narrow hallway to my bedroom. I peeked inside and saw no one. I turned on the light, got down on the floor just outside the doorway and looked under the bed. Nothing. I proceeded to check both of my windows for signs of a break-in, which were not present. Both windows were closed and locked. I knew it. I was totally seeing things. I crawled back into bed and decided to watch some TV in order to calm myself down and distract from thoughts of the scary as hell dream I just had. I turned on the TV, flipped on a channel with a seemingly boring program, and put the remote control on my bedside table. I was laying on my right side, facing away from the wall that I mentioned previously. As I laid there, my eyes began to adjust to the dark room with the faint light from the TV screen. Just beyond the TV, I saw something that made my heart sink into the pit of my stomach. Inside my closet, with one of the doors now slightly closed, I saw the man standing perfectly still, facing the wall, hiding, waiting for me to fall asleep, I imagine. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't move. I sat and stared at the man in my closet for what seemed like minutes, but was likely only a few seconds. I quietly got out of bed, hoping that the man wouldn't notice and that my dad could catch him hiding in the closet. I once again made my way to my parents' bedroom door, still remaining as quiet as I possibly could, and went inside. I shook my dad and my mum at the same time and woke them up. I then said, "Shh, don't make any sound. There's someone in my closet." My parents both jumped up and said,
What?
I repeated myself and asked them to please call 911. My mum immediately picked up the phone. Neither of my parents doubted my claim, as I'd always been honest and forthright. They both knew that there was no way I was making this up, or that I was mistaken. I am sure that the look I must have had on my face made it clear that this was really happening. My dad told my mum and I that he was going to look and urged us to stay in their bedroom and lock the door. So we did. At this point, I was beyond scared. I didn't know what the man was capable of, whether he had a weapon or whether my dad was safe. I just stood in the room with my mum and cried. After what felt like hours, my dad knocked on the door and told me it was him and that it was okay to open the door. My mum unlocked the door and let my dad inside. I said something to the effect of, "Did you get him?" And my dad looked at me with the most unsettling and confused look imaginable. He said,
There's no one there.
I assured him that there was indeed a man in my room and that he had been poking me. My dad said that he had just checked every inch of the house and found no one. He had also checked the doors and windows, just as I had done. Then it hit me. He must have had a key. As soon as I said this, my parents looked at each other in absolute terror. Our nearest neighbor, a trusted and beloved friend whom we considered family, was in possession of a key to our house, as she had regularly babysat me since I was a toddler. She was the only person outside of my immediate family with a key to our home. Soon after this revelation, the police arrived, took statements, checked around our property, and left. None of us got any sleep that night. The next day, my dad went to my neighbor's house and asked her if she knew where the key to our house was. She said yes, and when she went to show him, she saw that it was missing. Her home had no signs of a break-in, and she had always kept her doors and windows locked. My parents had all of the locks on our doors changed and opted to never again give a key to anyone except in the wake of an emergency. I never discovered the identity of the man that lurked in my bedroom that night. The event left me traumatized, and it took a very long time for me to accept what happened and move on. My sleeping trouble turned into full-on insomnia, and for about a decade, I was unable to sleep without a light on. It has been 20 years since that night, and apart from my parents, I have never told a soul about it till now. I've actually found writing this to be very cathartic. My heart goes out to anyone who suffered anything similar, and I hope that you're all able to find peace within yourselves.
Number 3.
I'm a 19-year-old male. To give some backstory here, this is my mother's story. However, I was with her during this incident, but I was only 3 years old. Therefore, I remember this slightly, but I'm gonna tell it from her point of view anyway. To give you an idea of the layout of our house and garden, the living room has multiple windows that directly look out onto the back garden. There is a big gate in our driveway to stop anyone getting in. Next to the living room is the kitchen, which also has more windows, but also the back door. This will be relevant to the story. Okay, so my mother was completing the household chores as she does every day. I was sitting in the living room, watching television on the sofa, with my back to the living room windows. All of a sudden, 3-year-old me saw a figure reflecting off of the picture frame hanging on the wall opposite to the window. I asked my mum if my dad was back from work, to which she said no. I'll never forget the look of horror on her face when I told her that he was. He's in the garden. She looked outside the window and almost had a heart attack when she saw a scruffy looking but fairly built man outside the living room window. This didn't seem to faze him at all though. He smiled at my mum through the glass and she asked him what he was doing on our property. He said nothing, with the same sadistic smirk on his face. She said that she was going to call the police, and what he said is one of the scariest things I've ever heard. He screamed at my mother through the glass that if she even got her phone out, that he would break the glass and kidnap me. My mother was terrified. She wanted to protect me by calling the police, but she also didn't want him to hurt me if she tried to call them. As soon as he saw that she was terrified, he ran for the back door. Luckily, it was locked because my mum has always been a paranoid person, so she always locks the doors. He screamed at her to let him in, or if she didn't, he'd find a way in and kill us both. My mother told him to fuck off, which enraged him, and he pulled out a pocket knife and began bashing hard against the windows. I was still oblivious to what was happening as I just thought it was my dad, only being 3 years old of course. My mum frantically grabs me, and I don't mean pick up. She literally grabbed me off of the sofa and booked it up the stairs. We were backing up in the upstairs hallway looking for anywhere to hide, when my mum's younger brother popped out of his room with his headphones on. My mum didn't even realize he was home, and he clearly didn't hear the commotion downstairs because of his headphones. My uncle was 25 at the time and was really well built. He intimidated a lot of people, and my mum cried and told him that there's a guy who's trying to break in. Whilst she's still telling him this, that creepy lunatic screamed from downstairs that he was in the house. He said that cynically, "Boogeyman is coming to get you," which really freaked me out. It freaked me out so much that I actually remember it to this day. Anyway, since the guy didn't know my uncle was home, he kept yelling and telling us to come out and that it won't be painful. My uncle told us to lock ourselves in the bathroom and call the police. We did just that, and after about 5 minutes of groaning and blatant violence downstairs, the police stormed in and found the guy bloodied and my uncle on top of him, beating him mercilessly. My uncle really didn't hold back. Turns out, he was a well-known paedophile, which is why he was watching me for so long whilst I was watching TV. After that day, my mum was terrified to be alone at the house. I loved it as a child because I found the running and hiding fun, obviously because I was only 3. I can never thank my uncle enough for being there at the right time when my mother clearly forgot that he was still at home. It honestly gives me the chills wondering what he would have done to me and my mother if my uncle wasn't home.
Number 4.
I'm a 17-year-old male, and this happened to me a few days ago, whilst I was home alone. I virtually live in the middle of absolutely nowhere, with the nearest neighbour and police station being around a half an hour away from me, as my parents decided to soak up the country air and atmosphere. My house is 3 stories high, and my bedroom is the top right window if you are looking at my house from the front, and my garden leads to a set of woods which is about 10 miles long. To get to the woods, I would have to go into my garden and walk for around 5 minutes, and from there I would have to hop a little fence and then I'd be in. And to be honest, when it's dark, that set of woods creeps me out. Anyway, my parents and younger brother were on holiday in Corsica to soak up the sun and sightseeing, as Corsica has some beautiful views and a lovely atmosphere. I couldn't go as I was working every day so that I could earn an extra buck or two. I heated up some spaghetti and meatballs, which my mum left me the day before, and all was going well. The bass was booming and the house was in good form. I had a couple of beers and ate my dinner. The thing that was weird was that I couldn't shake off this feeling of being watched, which I can't say I had experienced before. I brushed it off as paranoia as it was dark since it was around 11 PM. However, this feeling stayed with me and would not leave me. Eventually, I turned off the speakers and all of the downstairs lights. I locked all the doors and windows. I made my way to bed and browsed Reddit and Spotify for an hour. The house was silent as I was surfing the web, which was expected. That was when I heard something or someone walking on my driveway. My driveway is made from gravel, so I could easily hear the footsteps. They sounded as if they were trying not to be heard, as they were slow and light steps. I could just look out my window and see who it is, but I didn't want to alert them that someone's home, so I kept my cool and waited it out. I nearly pissed myself when I heard the lounge window being tapped on very, very slowly, and my adrenaline started to kick in as the knocking slowly turned to rapid banging. What the actual fuck, I remember saying to myself with a shaky voice. Who in the world would be banging on my lounge window at 12:30 AM? Plus, I live in the middle of nowhere, which really had me on edge. That was when I heard glass shatter. My heart raced and my eyes widened. Someone was in my house, and I was not going to have them kill me or abduct me. I sprinted to the French doors in my parents' room, opened them, and launched myself out of them, which was about a 20-feet drop. Thankfully, I wasn't hurt, but I couldn't care less. The adrenaline was pumping like it was going out of fashion. I made a beeline for the tree line in the woods, hopping the small fence with absolute ease. I hid behind the tree line and saw my kitchen light flick on. Fuck. I was really petrified and I needed to calm down, but I just couldn't. What if they found me? What if they caught me and tortured me? This can't be happening, I remember spitting out. After I said that, I saw the silhouette of a man in my kitchen rummaging through the drawers and cupboards. Whilst watching him, I realised that I had no cell phone reception. That's what happens when you live in a remote area. But then, what I heard freaked me the absolute fuck out. I heard twigs snap behind me, and I flicked my head back like a catapult, and there was another man dressed in all black with a balaclava covering his face. It was a lure. They lured me outside to get me. I then bolted it into the woods as fast as I could, but I wasn't fast enough as this man was not far behind me. He then rugby tackled me onto the ground. I can easily say he was about 6'5" and at least 250 pounds, as I couldn't move. "What's going on?" I shouted in disarray. He gestured and pointed to my house.
That,
he said in a low voice as he pulled out what looks like a Swiss Army knife.
my colleague is taking care of your house,
he said. I thought that was the end of me. I was shouting and trying my best to move, but to no avail. I had to do something. He was watching the house while pinning me down, but my right hand was still able to move a tad. I just about grabbed the nearest stick subtly and rammed it into his eye socket. Survival mode kicked in. He eventually lost grip and I got hold of the Swiss Army knife the guy had and plunged it into his leg with all my might. And then I bolted into the woods as I could hear a loud scream from the man I just stabbed. Whilst in the middle of all this, the lords must have been watching over me as I somehow got phone service. I called the cops and they said they would be there within 20 minutes. Fuck, 20 goddamn minutes of waiting for the cops? I decided to run around the woods and watch the house from a distance so that I could see them if they were looking for me. I went around and I could see the man from before that I stabbed in the same spot. That made me feel a little easier as I knew exactly where they were now. At this point, I could hear extremely faint sirens in the distance. And then I saw the other guy in my house, but he didn't see me, so I quietly dashed for the woods opposite my house. Shortly after this, the guy that I stabbed called out to the guy in the house.
"Pete, you there?
He shouted.
We need to fucking go, now!"
He shouted again. The guy that was inside the house, Pete, then came out of the house with black bags and he sprinted down the road, where I'm guessing they later joined because a while later the police arrived. But the two men were long gone by this point. They searched around the house and the fields nearby but couldn't find them. An investigation was launched with no conclusion. So yeah, that's the story of how I survived a terrifying home invasion.
Number 5.
This incident messed me up for a while, and I'm still not completely okay, but it's easier to cope. It was the middle of summer and my parents had left for the weekend to go to our house in the Cape Cod. It's about a 2-hour drive away, so it's no big deal for them to leave me alone for a few days. My mum had made up some pulled pork and pasta for me to heat up to eat whenever, and I had some money if I wanted to order pizza. Things were all good. The first night I was alone, I stayed up till 3 in the morning playing Xbox, so I woke up really late the next day. I checked my phone when I woke up and saw that it was a little past 1. I had made plans to play some street hockey with my friends at 3, so I threw myself out of bed and stumbled into the shower. I take really long showers, so when my parents are gone, I go crazy. I was in there for about 45 minutes on my phone scrolling through Reddit and Twitter and whatnot, when I heard my front door open. The bathroom is directly up the stairs from the back door, and the thing is pretty loud when it opens and closes. I immediately froze, since obviously I was supposed to be alone. I waited for about 2 minutes, ears strained in trying to hear anything else. Nothing. I figured it was the wind or maybe my parents were home early, so I turned off the shower, wrapped my towel around myself, and slowly walked down the stairs to check it out. So, the stairs to the kitchen, where the back door is, are pretty tight and walled in, so I can't see into the kitchen when I walk down. Even though my house is old, and each step on the stairs makes a super loud creak, I still took my time and tried to be as quiet as possible. I probably took 45 seconds walking down all 12 of the steps. So, when I get to the second to last stair, I take a little breath to compose myself. In my mind, I knew I was being stupid. There obviously wasn't anything in the kitchen. There's no way I wouldn't have heard another noise, and there's no reason for them to still be in the kitchen even if there were burglars or something in the house. After sort of mentally chastising myself for being such a wuss, I sort of chuckled to myself for being so stupid and just normally walked the last 2 stairs and turned the corner into the kitchen. Standing about 2 feet away from me in the middle of my kitchen is a man staring straight at me, perfectly still with a massive smile across his face, just staring at me. The thing I remember most vividly wasn't his face or his smile, but his arms. They weren't just at his side. He held them in the strangest, most abnormal position I've ever seen. They were in the position where one would normally hold their arms, but he had rotated them to the point where they were almost completely reversed, as well as lifting them up and a little behind himself. I don't know why I remember this so much, but it's just the most demonic, abnormal position I've ever seen. Honest to God, I think I almost had a heart attack right there. Looking back, I can realize how creepy this situation was, but in the moment, I just took a step towards him and punched him as hard as I could in the jaw, sort of half slapping and pushing him towards the ground. The second I connected, I beelined up the stairs, dropping my towel in the kitchen with my heart beating out of control. I sprinted into my room and locked the door behind me. I quickly put a chair up against the doorknob like you see in TV. Almost without thinking, I immediately called 911 and nearly in tears told the operator what happened. As I sat on the floor of my room, in practically the fetal position, staring at the door praying that a cop would be here soon, I noticed the light coming from the gap between my door had stopped. The guy was standing outside of my door. There's no words to describe the feeling I had. I was paralyzed with fear, watching the shadow across the bottom of the door shift in tiny ways. I stayed balled up, staring at the gap, praying the man would go away for what seemed like an hour. All the while, the 911 operator was asking, "Hello? Sir? Sir, are you there? Hello?" I didn't want to make a noise, and even if I wanted to move my arms to bring the phone to my mouth, I don't think I could have. Eventually, the light returned to the gap, and I heard the faintest of footsteps slowly creaking the wooden floorboards as he walked down the hall. It was silent for minutes as I just sat there curled up, unable to even speak. I heard banging on the front door and the sound of 2 officers entering my house. I finally felt safe and I opened the door to the 2 of them standing there. Nowadays, my parents don't even leave me home alone anymore, thank God, and I check every lock on the house before going to bed. I still get nightmares occasionally and my heart starts racing whenever I see someone standing still, but I'm doing alright. Even working with sketchy artists and a few lineups, the police never found whoever that guy was in my house. That sends shivers down my spine every time I look outside, half expecting to see him standing across the street smiling under a lamppost. I have no idea what he wanted or who he was. Hey guys, it's that Grim Raider here. So, thank you very much for listening through that. I appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed, what are you doing? Come on, you've got to subscribe. I mean, you might as well just slap a like, just throw in a comment here and there, you know, just because you can, really. I mean, nothing's stopping you from doing it, right? Nah, but seriously, thank you very much for listening through. If you want to listen to more stories like this, on the screen, you can click on either video, that's the 2 previous videos, or you can go in the description and there's also a link to the previous video. There's also a playlist link which will lead you to a lot of videos very similar to this with hundreds of awesome stories like these. So yeah, with that I leave you with thank you very much, and you'll hear from me very soon.